Chapter 55. It seems like General isn't interested in buying a sword. The General only wants a sword worth 8,000 taels of silver, not my sword. Wang Chong shook his head. Does Gongzi think that your sword isn't worth 8,000 gold taels? Zhao Fengchen smiled. Wang Chong shook his head with a smile, not bothering to argue with him. My words are still the same. You aren't allowed to look or touch it. If you wish to buy it, you can take it away for 4,800 gold taels. By tomorrow, it won't be this price anymore. After saying those words, Wang Chong flung his sleeves and turned around to leave. Without any hesitation, he stepped out of the door in the blink of an eye, leaving no room for negotiation. Lord, what do we do? That lad isn't buying it at all? After Wang Chong left, a tall and thin Imperial Army commander beside Zhao Fengchen finally couldn't help but grumble. Let me think about it. Frowning, Zhao Fengchen fell into deep contemplation. 8,000 gold taels. This was more than 10 times higher than Wang Chong's initial offer. However, Wang Chong rejected it without any hesitation. His decisiveness far exceeded his expectations. This was something that Zhao Fengchen didn't expect. Lord, why are you wasting your breath on him? If that lad doesn't agree to it, we'll just forcefully take down the sword from the Blue Bottle Pavilion. The tall and thin Imperial Army commander suggested. He was extremely dissatisfied with Wang Chong's attitude. They were Imperial Army commanders. Wasn't this lad being too arrogant? No. This Blue Bottle Pavilion is the property of the Duke of Wei. Others might not know of it, but do you think that you don't? After so many days, when have you seen anyone stealing swords? With a stern expression, Zhao Fengchen rejected it without any hesitation. Furthermore, do you still want the face of the Imperial Army? If such a thing were to happen, how are we going to face ourselves in the future? But Lord Huang, the tall and thin Imperial Army commander, wanted to say something, but the moment the words left his mouth, he realized that he had said something wrong. He hurriedly stopped himself, but it was already too late. Turning around, he saw that Zhao Fengchen's complexion had turned incomparably awful. You don't have to worry about Lord Huang. I'll handle it myself. Hearing the words Lord Huang, Zhao Fengchen clearly felt a little irritated. His interest seemed to have diminished by quite a bit, and it wasn't as intense as before. I'll leave this sword to you. When they come back, help me hang it on the gate. Since I can't buy the sword, I might as well join this gamble. Zhao Fengchen removed an ancient-looking silver sword from his waist and tossed it over. After which, he walked through the door and left with widened strides. At the same time, outside the Blue Bottle Pavilion, Wang Chong and Wei Hao were walking side by side. This bastard. I thought he was a straightforward person, but it turns out he's the same as everyone else. The moment he walked out of the Blue Bottle Pavilion, Wei Hao cursed nonstop. If not for Wang Chong's explanation, he wouldn't have known that Zhao Fengchen's 8,000 gold taels had such a purpose. Don't blame him. If he didn't even distinguish between good and bad swords, he would have bought them. That's the real problem. Wang Chong waved his hands casually. In his previous life, Zhao Fengchen was a spendthrift. He was the one who picked up a few 100,000 Wuxia steel weapons. Many people might have thought that he was a fool due to his wealth. However, the truth was the exact opposite. After interacting with Zhao Fengchen this time, Wang Chong could sense it. Even though Zhao Fengchen was a spendthrift person, what he bought was what he thought was the most valuable. Towards those worthless items, Zhao Fengchen wasn't any more generous than others. In fact, if one were to think about it, how could a future marshal of the Imperial Army be a fool? However, aren't you walking a little too quickly? That's 8,000 gold taels we're talking about. To be able to afford such a price, these people are the real buyers. Wei Hao caught up to Wang Chong's footsteps and said indignantly, thinking about how it was a pity to let go of such a rich man just like that. Don't worry, he won't be able to escape. It's only a matter of time before he comes back. Wang Chong faintly smiled. The relationship between Zhao Fengchen and the Wuxia steel was fated, and it couldn't be severed. Wang Chong believed that in the future, when the black cloth covering the sword is removed and the Wuxia steel weapons are unveiled, Zhao Fengchen would definitely feel the calling. Zhao Fengchen, Wang Chong muttered to himself. Suddenly, a thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. In his previous life, Zhao Fengchen was a legend. Regardless of whether it was the story between him and the Wuxia steel, his astounding cultivation, or his death match with the foreign invaders, he left a deep impression on everyone in the world. However, compared to the illustrious position he would have in his future life, the current Zhao Fengchen was still inconspicuous. From his actions, it was clear that he was a high-ranking officer in the Imperial Army. However, there were at least 1,000 high-ranking officers like him in the Imperial Army. Based on the memories of his previous life, Zhao Fengchen would remain in his current position for at least 6 to 7 years. And the reason for this situation was related to a nemesis of Zhao Fengchen's. Huang Xiaotian. A name flashed across Wang Chong's mind. For Zhao Fengchen to become one of the 3 publicly acknowledged legends in the history of the Imperial Army, his talent and strength were unimaginable. However, it was inconceivable that such an outstanding person could only become the Grand Marshal at the age of 40. In his entire life, he was truly a late bloomer. The reason why such a situation occurred was closely related to another Imperial Army general who was equally powerful and talented. That person's name was Huang Xiaotian. Even though his achievements couldn't match up to Zhao Fengchen's, Huang Xiaotian wasn't too far off from Zhao Fengchen. In the Imperial Army, other than the Grand Marshal, he was definitely one of the strongest commanders. As the saying goes, a mountain can't hold 2 tigers. 2 people with similar interests could become friends, but 2 people with similar personalities could only become nemesis. Zhao Fengchen and Huang Xiaotian were destined to never be friends for the rest of their lives. It was this Huang Xiaotian who forcefully suppressed Zhao Fengchen's position as the commander of the Imperial Army for 6 to 7 years. It was only after Zhao Fengchen displayed his prowess that Huang Xiaotian was left behind that Zhao Fengchen rose to the top and became a legend in the future. Tracing back to the source of the feud between the 2 of them, it came from an extremely important selection for the commander of the Imperial Army. Back then, both Huang Xiaotian and Zhao Fengchen were popular contenders. However, in the duel, Zhao Fengchen lost to Huang Xiaotian and lost this important opportunity. From then on, Huang Xiaotian made use of his status as the superior to force Zhao Fengchen into that position, rendering him unable to move. And in terms of time, the Imperial Army selection should have happened at this very moment. This thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind, and for a moment he was stunned. Suddenly, Wang Chong understood why Zhao Fengchen would look for him. "Wang Chong, what's wrong?" A voice sounded by his ear. Wei Hao stared at Wang Chong in astonishment, unable to understand why the latter wasn't leaving. "It's nothing." Wang Chong suddenly recovered from his daze. Shaking his head, he pulled open the carriage door and dived into a carriage by the roadside with Wei Hao. On the carriage, with a flick of the whip, the carriage galloped off into the distance. "Gongzi, wait a moment." Just as they were speaking, flurried footsteps sounded behind them. Wang Chong and Wei Hao turned around, only to see an Imperial Army member rushing over from the Blue Bottle Pavilion. Speaking of the devil, Wei Hao turned to look at Wang Chong with his mouth agape, as though he had seen a ghost. They were just talking about this matter a moment ago, and these fellows came so quickly. Did they change their minds so quickly? Wang Chong was way too incredible. However, contrary to their expectations, the Imperial Army member brought up another matter. "Gongzi, may I ask what the metal mountain in front of the Blue Bottle Pavilion is for? Is it for sale as well?" As the Imperial Army member spoke, he pointed to the metal mountain in front of the Blue Bottle Pavilion. The Blue Bottle Pavilion was only a short distance away from the royal palace. The matter that had happened here had already spread through the Imperial Army. Speaking of swords, there was no one who loved swords more than the Imperial Army. The sword duel gamble in the Blue Bottle Pavilion had already attracted the attention of a large group of Imperial Army members. Otherwise, they wouldn't have appeared here in the first place. It was one thing for everyone to know about the swords on the pavilion. However, no one knew what the massive metal lump, or rather, the metal mountain, was for. In the royal palace, the various Imperial Army members were speculating on the matter, and there were even people who placed their bets on the matter. It was truly a bustling scene. This imperial army member was also perplexed by the matter. Upon meeting Wang Chong, he hurried over to ask about it. He. Understanding what was going on, Wang Chong couldn't help but smile. Make a guess. Leaving behind these words, the carriage left the Blue Bottle Pavilion. After returning from the Blue Bottle Pavilion, Wang Chong quickly immersed himself in his martial arts practice. Judging by the time, the 3 great training camps should have already started their preparations. The requirements to enter the 3 great training camps were extremely high right from the start, and it would only get higher and higher in the future. Without sufficient martial arts, it would be difficult for one to enter. Other than this, Wang Chong also had to consider grandfather's birthday. In the entire Wang clan, the true backbone of the clan had never been his father Wang Yan, big uncle Wang Zhen, aunt, uncle, and the others. From the start to the end, there had only been a single backbone of the Wang clan, and that was his grandfather. As a clan of generals and ministers in the capital, the Wang clan possessed a huge amount of resources. However, these resources were usually indiscernible. In terms of wealth, the Wang clan couldn't match up to the Zhang clan, and in terms of influence, they couldn't match up to the Yao clan. Even Yao Feng had access to more resources than him. However, the Wang clan was a true top-notch clan in the Tang dynasty. The reason why there was such an incongruous situation was because the descendants of the Wang clan had to earn grandfather's approval in order to receive resources. This was the case for his big uncle Wang Zhen to enter the royal court, his father Wang Yan to enter the military, and even his big aunt and little uncle were the same as well. Thus, when grandfather passed away in his previous life and big uncle chose the wrong side, the Wang clan fell so quickly. The Wang clan doesn't tolerate mediocre people. This was grandfather's philosophy. Thus, without displaying sufficient capability and receiving grandfather's approval, the descendants of the Wang clan were no different from ordinary clans. If Wang Chong wanted to receive resources from the clan to change his fate, he would have to obtain grandfather's approval. Furthermore, the Four Quarters Embassy was built by the emperor for grandfather and the others, and it was a place where they could discuss political affairs. It was heavily guarded and guarded by the imperial army. Even the descendants of the Wang clan only had a single chance to enter the Four Quarters Embassy every year. It was during grandfather's birthday. This was also Wang Chong's only chance in a year. Chapter 56. While Wang Chong was holed up in the Wang clan residence, another person in the capital was not idling around. How is it? Did you find anything? In the Duke of Su's mansion, Su Bai reclined on a rattan chair made of golden threads, fiddling with a green thumb ring between his fingers, twirling it around. Behind him, 2 delicate and pretty girls were fanning themselves non-stop. During his stay in the Duke Su residence, Su Bai had not been idle for even a moment. Wang Chong's affairs were constantly turning over in his mind. The Yao clan had allied with King Qi, and Old Master Yao's methods were unfathomable. If the Su clan wanted to hitch a ride on the Yao clan and King Qi's boat, they had to hurry. As for Wang Chong, it was Su Bai's gift to Yao Feng, as well as the Su clan's gift to the Yao clan. As long as this matter was done well, his relationship with Yao Feng would grow even closer. As the future successor of the Su clan, as long as he could maintain a good relationship with Yao Feng, the relationship between the Su clan and the Yao clan wouldn't deteriorate. As for the Yao clan's recent setback, Su Bai didn't pay much attention to it, nor did he know what was going on. To Su Bai and the Su clan, as long as the Yao clan's old master Yao was still standing, this matter wasn't a big deal. Reporting to Gongzi, we have been keeping an eye on the Wang clan, but after that lad Wang Chong obtained the gold, he has been living in seclusion. It's hard for us to get any concrete news about him. Just as he was deep in thought, a voice sounded. In front of Su Bai, a tall and skinny scout in his 20s bowed respectfully and reported his findings. Living in seclusion? Su Bai recovered from his daze and frowned. This wasn't in line with his expectations. After borrowing so much money, shouldn't a profligate scion like Wang Chong go out to indulge in debauchery and extravagance? Living in seclusion wasn't in line with his style. Thus, we've observed him, and in the past month, he has only gone out 7 to 8 times. Furthermore, there were a few times where he went out because there were too many people in the city. The other times, he went to look for Wei Hao. The tall scout said. There were many spies like him in the Su family. The tall and thin man was just one of them. Up until now, the group of people hadn't realized that Wang Chong had deliberately gone around in circles to shake them off. They thought that he had accidentally passed through the downtown area and lost his target because there were too many people. However, we noticed that Wei Hao was making quite a few moves. There's a sword seller in the Blue Bottle Pavilion controlled by the Duke of Wei residence, and he set up a sword duel gamble, causing a huge commotion. Before the lanky spy could finish, Su Bai interrupted him impatiently. I don't care about Wei Hao, and I'm not interested in swords or sabers. In the future, you don't have to report such trivial matters to me. Just keep an eye on Wang Chong. I don't believe that he won't spend 1,000 taels of gold. Yes. The tall and skinny spy quickly stopped talking. Also, it's about a month's time. Help me contact the Gongzi of the other clans. 3 days later, no, 7 days later, I'll have them bring the debt and we'll head to the Wang clan to demand for the money. I want to make them suffer a huge loss before the Wang clan old master's 70th birthday. Lying on the rattan chair, Su Bai sneered coldly. Gongzi. The tall and skinny spy left to carry out his orders. The sword duel gamble at the Blue Bottle Pavilion was still going on. 9,600 taels. This was the 5th day's price from the Blue Bottle Pavilion. Initially, Zhao Fengchen was still hesitant and had the intention to buy it. However, upon seeing the latest price, that thought disappeared from his mind. He didn't even buy it at 4,800 taels. Now that the price had doubled, all the more he wouldn't buy it. Otherwise, wouldn't he be a fool? Even so, the legend of the Blue Bottle Pavilion continued. On the 6th day, 19,200 taels. This was a sky-high price that was unprecedented in history. When Wei Hao listed this price, even he shuddered in shock. On the first day, when Wang Chong listed the price at 600 taels, he didn't think much of it. Even when the price doubled, Wei Hao didn't realize the true meaning behind his actions. This was the first time that the price of a sword in the Central Plains had exceeded 10,000 taels. Under the circumstances where top-notch swords were only priced at 600 gold taels or at most 1,000 gold taels, this was a price that one could only look up to. How can this be? Wei Hao looked at the price that he had listed, and as though a hungover, he suddenly woke up from his stupor. Only then did he realize what he had been doing for the past few days. Even those from the 4 great swordsmithing clans were stunned. Everything that Wang Chong had done had happened right before their eyes. In fact, on the first day, they had even sent men to wreak havoc on the Blue Bottle Pavilion. After which, when Wang Chong doubled the price, they knew what was going on. However, no one truly understood what Wang Chong was doing. Until the words on the signboard of the Blue Bottle Pavilion turned into an astonishing 5 digits. Wang Gongzi, if you wish to go back on your words, it's still not too late. No one knew that when Wei Hao hung up the signboard, the Zhang clans Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian had secretly arrived at the Wang clan's residence. The two of them had a grim expression on their faces. You all know about it? Wang Chong received the two of them in his backyard. While practicing his fist technique, he chuckled to the two of them. Compared to a few days ago, Wang Chong's aura had grown significantly stronger. This was the work of the dragon bone art. Wang Gongzi, do you know what you are doing? This isn't a joke. The duo's expression didn't ease up in the slightest. They didn't think that Wang Chong's joke was funny at all. 19200 gold taels for 30 people. If you were to lose, you would have to pay a total of 57,000 gold taels. I don't think that the Wang clan can afford such a sum. The duo's expression was grim, and it could even be said that they were worried. Wang Chong was too young. Youths tend to be hot-blooded, and hot-blooded people tend to commit mistakes. The sword duel gamble at the Blue Bottle Pavilion wasn't a small matter that could be messed around. It could be said that the slightest mistake could lead to an unprecedented crisis for the Wang clan. Duke Jiao's illustrious reputation would be ruined here. Upon hearing those words, Wang Chong chuckled. On the first day, 600 gold taels. On the second day, 1,200 gold taels. On the third day, 2,400 gold taels. On the sixth day, it became 19,200 gold taels. Wang Chang's thoughts were clearly revealed in these 6 days. In the other world, this was a classic hunger marketing tactic. However, in this world, it was still a novel concept. No one had tried it before. Even Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian didn't realize that they had subconsciously accepted this method. The moment the two of them came to him, they didn't question whether it was reasonable to sell a sword for 10,000 gold taels or whether it was appropriate to do so. Instead, they questioned whether he would be able to pay back the bet if he sold it at such a high price. This was a kind of subtle influence. If Wang Chong had priced the Wuxia steel sword at 19,200 gold taels from the start, it would have been impossible for him to achieve such an effect. Elders, do you think that I will lose? Wang Chong's fists rumbled. While practicing his punches, he spoke to the two of them without turning his head. Wang Chong, don't you understand the severity of this matter? The merchants from Charax Spaznu, Abbasid Caliphate, Silla, and Goguryeo are all from the major swordsmithing clans. On top of that, there are also various sword shops and weapon shops. In fact, I heard that there are even military commanders involved. This isn't a game you kids are playing. You can get away with it if you want to. If you don't handle this matter well, you will bring a calamity upon the Wang clan. Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian shook their heads. This wasn't a problem of whether Wang Chong would lose or not. Rather, it was impossible for Wang Chong to win. The Wang clan had never been a swordsmithing clan, and they didn't have any master swordsmiths either. In this matter, it was impossible for Wang Chong to win against those swordsmithing clans and weapon merchants of the western regions. Wang Chong was courting trouble for himself, and trouble for the Wang clan. Elders, you don't have to worry about the duel. Isn't tomorrow the last day? If there's a need, I'll look for you then. Wang Chong smiled calmly. There wasn't the slightest change in his expression. The reason why Wang Chong took over the Hyderabad ores wasn't because of his courage but because of his own confidence. Swordsmithing was an art. Not only did it emphasize on the materials used, it also emphasized on the craftsmanship. In these two aspects, there was no one in this era who could surpass him. Wuxia steel didn't just use the Hyderabad ores and the Hyderabad technique, it was also fused with the swordsmithing technique he had learned from another space-time continuum. The grooves on the swords could enhance the might of Wuxia steel weapons to the greatest extent. In this era, Wuxia steel weapons represented the highest tier of swords. While there was no sword that could match it, there was definitely no sword that could surpass it. At the very least, it was impossible for such swords to originate from Charax Spazinu, Abbasid Caliphate, Goguryeo, Nanzhao, and the 4 great swordsmithing clans in the capital. Wang Chong had this confidence, which was why he dared to accept the duel. However, it wasn't convenient for Wang Chong to tell Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian about this. Sigh, Wang Gongzi, no matter when you have thought it through, you can look for us before noon tomorrow. As long as you hand over the contract for the Hyderabad ores to us, we will try our best to minimize your losses. Even though our Zhang clan swords and sabers might not be the best in the world, there aren't many who can defeat us. This way, we can more or less be of help to you. The two of them sighed deeply. Their hearts were filled with worry. Wang Chong was still too young, and it was easy for him to be impetuous. When impetuous, it was easy for him to act rashly and disregard the consequences. The sword duel gamble at the Blue Bottle Pavilion was the best proof. However, it was a pity that it was impossible for Wang Chong to listen to their advice. Let's hope that this matter doesn't implicate too many people. A child who doesn't know the immensity of the heavens and earth, I can only hope that the Wang clan doesn't suffer too much of a blow. Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian heaved a long sigh before bidding their farewells and leaving. This Zhang clan might be a good partner to work with in the future. After Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian left, Wang Chong stood in the garden and muttered to himself, deep in thought. The Zhang clan didn't wait for the dust to settle to strike him while he was down and snatch the contract. Instead, they sought him out in advance, hoping to minimize his losses. From this point, it could be seen that the two of them had left a good impression on Wang Chong. If he were to carry out his plans in the future, the Zhang clan might be a suitable candidate. With such thoughts in mind, Wang Chong left the garden. The sun rose and the moon set. In the blink of an eye, it was already the 7th day. It's finally time to decide the victor. Chapter 57. The sun shone brightly in the clear sky. On this day, Wang Chong washed up early and changed into a clean green cotton robe. This way, he would appear to be older than his actual age. After doing all these, Wang Chong left the house, boarded the carriage, and headed towards the Blue Bottle Pavilion in high spirits. Outside the Blue Bottle Pavilion, there was a huge crowd. This was the last day of the sword duel gamble, and it had attracted countless spectators. Outside the Blue Bottle Pavilion, Wang Chong saw Wei Hao, who had been waiting for him for a long time. Wei Hao had 2 guards from the Wei clan by his side. His face was pale, and he paced back and forth non-stop. Beads of cold sweat formed on his forehead, and he looked anxious and uneasy. Great! Wang Chong, you're finally here. The moment Wang Chong's carriage arrived, Wei Hao felt as though a huge burden had been lifted off his shoulders. As though he had found his pillar of support, he hurried forward with his 2 guards. His complexion was much rosier. Xiaoyan, it's been hard on you. Wang Chong stepped out of the carriage and called out Wei Hao's nickname. Hearing such an intimate form of address, Wei Hao's heart warmed, and his expression relaxed slightly. But soon, Wei Hao's brows furrowed once more, and he felt uneasy. Wang Chong, have you really thought through this matter? More than 30 swords and sabers were no joke. It's not too late to regret it now. Wei Hao's voice trembled nervously as he spoke. Honestly speaking, Wei Hao didn't expect the matter of helping Wang Chong sell the Wuxia steel swords to develop to such a state. Wei Hao couldn't even sleep well when he saw the 30 or so treasured swords and sabers from the various factions hanging on the gate. Wei Hao had been keeping this matter from his family. His father was currently busy with an important matter in the royal court, and he didn't have the time to care about anything else. If he were to discover the truth, he would probably be beaten half to death. At times, Wei Hao truly admired Wang Chong from the bottom of his heart. As for the Wuxia steel weapons, he had only been assisting from the side, but he already felt very uneasy. However, Wang Chong was carrying a debt of 90,000 gold taels from Sinlu and 1,700 gold taels from the 8 Gods Pavilion. If things were to go wrong here, he might have to pay even more, possibly several 100,000 gold taels. There was no clan in the capital that could easily shoulder such a massive debt. If it were an ordinary person, they would have long been terrified, pale with anxiety, and sleepless nights. However, Wang Chong acted as if nothing had happened. He even had the mood to comfort himself. Wei Hao knew that if it were him, he definitely wouldn't be able to do it. Don't worry, Nian. You've known me for so long. Do I look like the kind of person who would seek death and make trouble for himself? Wang Chong chuckled. As he spoke, he patted Wei Hao's shoulders. Wei Hao said solemnly. He had grown up with Wang Chong, so he didn't think that Wang Chong was that kind of person. In fact, if Wang Chong was that kind of person, he wouldn't have been able to guide him to defeat Gao Fei at the 8 Gods Pavilion. But Wei Hao still wanted to say something. There's no buts. I have my own arrangements for this matter. Later on, you just have to follow my instructions. Wang Chong said calmly. His voice was filled with confidence. After a moment of silence, Wei Hao nodded his head seriously. The eaves of the Blue Bottle Pavilion were extremely high. Wang Chong took a glance and saw a huge crowd moving about. Everyone who had participated in the sword duel gamble had arrived here much earlier than Wang Chong. Even though it was noisy outside the Blue Bottle Pavilion, the interior of the Blue Bottle Pavilion was completely silent. No one spoke to one another, and there was an air of competition between them. Heh, the #1 sword in the world. Wang Chong smiled and shook his head. Retracting his gaze, he walked into the Blue Bottle Pavilion with Wei Hao. Wang Chong, is the price going to rise today? Wei Hao asked anxiously as they walked up the wooden stairs. There's no need for that. Wang Chong shook his head. It wasn't that he was afraid of losing too much in the duel gamble. Rather, there was no longer a need for it. Even though the price of Wuxia steel would rise to more than 100,000 gold taels in the future, given the current market, 19,200 gold taels was already the limit. There was a process of acceptance for everything. If the price were to rise too much, it would be too late. Walking up the antique wooden steps, Wang Chong and Wei Hao soon arrived at the third floor. The hall on the third floor was filled with people. The people from the 4 great swordsmithing clans, the swordsmithing shops in the capital, the swordsmithing clans from the western regions, the imperial army. They were all gathered here. From the looks of it, they had arrived a long time ago. Wei Gongzi, it's about time for the duel. Where's the owner of the sword? It's about time to call him out, right? The moment Wei Hao stepped onto the third floor, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. As for Wang Chong, he was completely ignored. Everyone, isn't the owner of the sword here? Wei Hao smiled and stepped to the side, giving way to Wang Chong behind him. It's a stab if I stretch my head out, but it's also a stab if I shrink my head back. After worrying for so long, Wei Hao had already thought things through. The duel gamble had already been decided, and it was too late to regret it now. Since that was the case, he might as well be more open about it. The moment Wei Hao said those words, countless gazes instantly gathered on Wang Chong. In that instant, there was a moment of silence in the crowded Blue Bottle Pavilion. Everyone stared at Wang Chong with shock, astonishment, disbelief, and doubt. That is the owner of the sword? The elder of the Cheng clan, Qing Yuqing, stepped forward and stared at Wang Chong with a look of disbelief. When Wei Hao and Wang Chong were at the bottom of the pavilion, many people had seen them, but no one thought much of it. In their view, to be able to cause such a huge ruckus in the Blue Bottle Pavilion, the other party should at least be a middle-aged man in his 30s or 40s. No one could have imagined that the other party would be a 17-year-old young man. He was too young. It's me, Wang Chong said calmly. Even before the bosses of the weapon trade, he showed no fear. You must be joking. In the end, the owner of that sword is a young man who's still wet behind the ears? Everyone was astonished. Brat, I don't care what your background is. I hope that you can take out 19,200 gold taels later. Amidst the eerie voice, a figure walked out. Head shopkeeper Luo of White Tiger Greatsword Pavilion glared at Wang Chong with hostility. Together with him, the other greatsword shops and greatsword shops stared at Wang Chong as well. Wang Chong sold his swords at the Blue Bottle Pavilion at a different price every day, and this had a huge impact on the other sword shops in the capital. This was especially so for the greatsword shops and greatsword shops. They were deeply humiliated. This time, the reason why the greatsword shops and greatsword shops took out their weapons and participated in this duel gamble was to teach this disruptor, who had broken the rules of the trade, a lesson. Only by killing the chicken to warn the monkey would they be able to intimidate the others and protect the authority and standing of the greatsword shops and greatsword shops in the capital. Don't worry, I'm here. Before so many people, how can I possibly escape? On the other hand, have you prepared the 1,200 gold taels? Wang Chong said calmly. Bullshit. The shopkeepers of the greatsword shops and greatsword shops flew into a rage, and even their beards curled up. It was one thing if the one who said those words was the capital's swordsmithing clans. However, Wang Chong, an unfamiliar young man, was a huge humiliation to them. It's just 1,200 gold taels. We don't think much of it. As long as you have the capability, you can take it anytime. The few of them blushed and turned their heads away in anger. They didn't want to say anything else. Wang Gongzi, making use of the moment when everyone's attention shifted away from Wang Chong, Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian hurriedly pulled Wang Chong to the side and whispered, "It's still not too late if you want to back out. Our Zhang clan has a few swords, and we can help you secretly swap them out." The Zhang clan was also participating in this duel gamble. It wasn't that they wanted to kick Wang Chong when he was down, but since it involved the #1 sword in the world, it was impossible for the Zhang clan to not participate in it. However, this matter was secondary. Right now, the two of them were worried about Wang Chong. You might not know how big of an impact this matter will have. Look outside. Almost all of the sword merchants in the capital have been attracted here. If this matter fails, it will be no small matter. The duel gamble hasn't officially started yet. This is our last chance. The two of them sighed deeply, worried for the Wang clan. They had already visited the Wang clan twice, and they could sense that the entire Wang clan, including Madame Wang, probably didn't know about this matter. The entire matter seemed to have been orchestrated by Wang Chong behind the Wang clan's back. Regardless of what his initial motive was, if the matter were to be exposed, the entire Wang clan would be held responsible for it. By then, who knew how big of a wave it would cause? Even though the two of them wanted the contract for the Hyderabad ores, they weren't willing to implicate the Wang clan. Wang Chong stared deeply at the two of them, and an indescribable feeling welled up in his heart. If the situation was different, he might have already given them the contract for the Hyderabad ores. However, Wang Chong knew that it was useless even if he gave them the contract. That was because it was impossible for the two Sindhi Buddhist monks to sell it. It was impossible for them to reach an agreement on the price. Furthermore, Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian didn't know that from the start. Wang Chong didn't think that he would lose. Thank you, both of you. I've said it before, if there's a need, I'll look for you. Wang Chong rejected them tactfully. Sigh. The two of them sighed deeply. They knew that it would be difficult to convince Wang Chong. Since that's the case, I hope that Gongzi will be able to fulfill his wish. Turning around, the disappointment in their eyes couldn't be concealed. Wang Chong stared at the back of the two of them silently. The truth was always grasped in the hands of the few. The two of them still felt that he had brought a huge disaster to the clan, but when they witnessed the true might of the Wuxia steel, they would change their minds. Wang Chong lifted his head. The sun was slowly rising and it wasn't far from the peak. It's about time, Wang Chong thought. With a flick of his robe, he walked toward the railing. Boom! Chapter 58. Look, it's starting. The person who provoked the 4 swordsmithing clans is actually a youngster in his teens. After waiting for so many days, the black cloth is finally going to be unveiled. I wonder what sword is worth 10,000 gold taels. It's not 10,000 gold taels, it's 19,200 gold taels. If he were to lose, he would have to compensate that much each of them. Heavens! Wouldn't he be making a huge loss then? Of course. Do you think that the 4 great swordsmithing clans of the capital are that easy to provoke? What a pity for that fellow. Outside the railing, a huge crowd could be seen, and a huge commotion could be heard. After 7 days of marketing, everyone's curiosity toward the sword hanging at the entrance of the Blue Bottle Pavilion had reached its peak. What kind of treasured sword was it that no one was allowed to look at or even touch? What kind of treasured sword was it for it to have the guts to set an unprecedented price tag of 10,000 gold taels? And now, it was finally time for the answer to be revealed. Everyone, are you all ready? As Wang Chong listened to the rumbling of mountains and seas, he turned around and looked at the people in the building. If anyone wishes to buy it, 19,200 gold taels, this is your last chance. Boom. The only response to Wang Chong's words was a burst of laughter. Even the elder of the Chung clan, Qing Yuqing, couldn't help but laugh. At the start, no one was willing to buy a sword with a starting price of 600 gold taels. Now that the price had doubled to 19,200 gold taels, there was even less reason for anyone to buy it. Otherwise, wouldn't they look foolish? Young man, you do have a sense of humor. However, you should take off your sword and remove the black cloth on it. That's right, let everyone see your sword, which is worth 19,200 gold taels. Someone chimed in, and the people in the building burst into laughter again. Don't spout nonsense, what 19,200 gold taels? It's double today. Right. It's 38,400 gold taels now. Whoever dares to spout nonsense, I'll teach him a lesson. Lad, there are so many people here, you can't be thinking of escaping, right? Hee, do you think that he can escape? The Blue Bottle Pavilion was filled with ridicule, and laughter. The gazes from all directions did not conceal the contempt and disdain in their hearts. Only Mozaid and Zhao Fengchen remained silent. The two of them looked at Wang Chong thoughtfully. Wang Chong, is there really no problem with this? Wei Hao's face turned pale again as he listened to the ridicule in his ears. Don't worry. Wang Chong patted Wei Hao's shoulders heavily as he spoke without hesitation. For some reason, Wei Hao suddenly felt a lot better when he heard the determination in Wang Chong's voice. Very good. Since no one wants to buy it, let's start the sword duel gamble now. Wang Chong raised his head and said, "Wait." All of a sudden, a voice sounded. Wang Chong raised his head and saw a familiar figure walk through the crowd. Yellow Dragon. Wang Chong and Wei Hao's eyelids twitched as they recognized the other party. This person was none other than Huang Jiao of the Huang clan, the one who caused trouble the other day, saying that Wang Chong was playing to the crowd and chasing the crowd away. Hee, lad, it's true that you're the one who proposed the sword duel gamble. However, there should be a set of rules for sword and saber duel gambling. Huang Jiao sneered coldly. He didn't have a good impression of Wang Chong, so he didn't bother speaking politely. What are you trying to say? Wang Chong asked calmly. With so many sword duels, are we going to just slash randomly? Everyone has taken out the famous swords and sabers from their clans, and weapons of this level are extremely sharp. Even if one were to win in a duel, it would leave behind some scratches and dents. If that's the case, there wouldn't be any meaning in winning. Thus, I have an idea. Why don't everyone report the sharpness of their weapons and see how much they can cut into the metal? This way, those who aren't sharp enough can back down. Not only will they be able to protect their own weapons, but they will also be able to avoid damaging the weapons of others. What do you think? Huang Jiao said gleefully. Good idea. Good idea. Many people responded to Huang Jiao's suggestion. Why don't we report it first? The weapons of our Li clan are forged using well-tempered steel. Not only are they tough, they are sharp as well. They are able to cut 4.5 centimeters into pig metal. A man in his 40s with the words Li clan of Qingteng embroidered on his chest stood out. He pointed to the sword of his clan hanging above the pavilion with a gleeful expression on his face. You dare to take out such a weapon? Our Lan Tianzheng clan has been researching the art of swordsmithing for generations, and the swords we forge are able to cut 5.5 centimeters into pig metal. The moment those words were spoken, the other swordsmithing clans also stood out with a proud look on their faces. There's no need to argue. Our Gengjin Great Sword Pavilion sword is forged using deep-sea black metal. The swords of your two clans are able to cut into scrap metal. The Great Sword Pavilion of the capital also stood out. Soon, an intense debate broke out in the Blue Bottle Pavilion. Even some merchants from the western regions who weren't very familiar with the Chinese language joined in. Some of them even argued till their faces turned red. Wang Chong could hear clearly that even though these people were arguing intensely, the sharpness of their swords wouldn't exceed 5 inches. That was to say, their swords could only cut 5 inches into pig metal. Even so, these people were gleeful and their noses were about to reach the heavens. After coming to this conclusion, Wang Chong sneered in disdain. These prestigious clans had been living in peace for too long. When they see their own swords, they would know what a true treasure sword is. There's no need to argue, there's no need to go through so much trouble. Wang Chong's voice suddenly sounded in everyone's ears. Before he finished his words, he immediately patted Wei Hao's shoulders. The latter understood Zhang Xian's intentions and leaped forward. As though a cannonball, he leaped over the railing of the 3rd floor of the Blue Bottle Pavilion and grabbed the Wu's steel sword wrapped in black cloth. Clang! The crisp cry of a sword reverberated in the air, and a cold gleam flashed in midair. Before anyone could react, Wei Hao had already become one with his sword, and as though a meteor, he plummeted from the sky, smashing into the metal mountain in front of the Blue Bottle Pavilion. Hong long long, the earth trembled and dust billowed. This action was so sudden that the bustling crowd outside the Blue Bottle Pavilion was the first to notice this sudden change, and it immediately quietened down. Clang clang clang. Amidst the billowing smoke and dust, a series of metal clanging sounds came from behind Wei Hao. More than 20 treasured swords and sabers that had been hung on the gatehouse to participate in the sword and saber gamble were all cut in half. The tips of the swords and sabers all fell from the sky and stabbed into the ground. Then, with a loud boom, amidst the billowing dust, the heavy metal mountain, which was at least the height of a human, suddenly split into two and fell to the ground. The cut was as smooth as a mirror. Outside the Bluebottle Pavilion, upon seeing this sight, the massive crowd was dumbfounded. The crowd was silent, not a single sound could be heard. Following which, the crowd in the Bluebottle Pavilion, who was in the midst of an intense debate, also noticed this sight. All of them stood on the pavilion with their mouths agape, unable to utter a single word. Pada. Mo's aide had been toying with a green thumb ring with a ruby embedded on it, but at this moment, he didn't even realize that his thumb ring had fallen to the ground. Silence. Deathly silence. In that instant, the entire Bluebottle Pavilion was deathly silent. Everyone's mind was blank and they were shocked speechless. Wang Chong had used the most unexpected method to give everyone an earth-shattering shock. Boom. After a brief moment of silence, the crowd finally reacted. Suddenly, a burst of earth-shattering cries of surprise broke out. Heavens! What did that fellow do? He actually split apart a metal mountain. How many CUN is that? 50 CUN? 100 CUN? How can there be such a formidable sword in the world? It's not just that metal mountain. Look at the swords and sabers on the Bluebottle Pavilion. They are all famous sabers, and every single one of them is a godly weapon that can slice through a hair. He actually managed to split more than 10 of them in a single breath. How can there be such a fearsome weapon in the world? This sudden sight sent everyone into a frenzy. For the past 7 days, everyone had been looking at Wang Chong as a joke. In fact, there were even some who secretly mocked him for being a fool. No one thought that Wang Chong would win this sword duel gamble. After all, only a handful of swordsmithing clans possessed top-notch smithing skills. However, no one could have imagined that Wang Chong would win this sword duel gamble. In the Bluebottle Pavilion, the weapon merchants stared at Wang Chong, and they were even more shocked than the crowd outside. The jaws of the elders of the Qing, Li, Huang, and Lu clan were about to drop to the ground. How is this possible? The hearts of the 4 great swordsmithing clans were in turmoil. Before this duel gamble, the 4 great swordsmithing clans had been mocking Wang Chong for trying to please the crowd. In fact, the 4 great swordsmithing clans even treated this as an opportunity to display their treasured swords. However, no one could have imagined that their swords would be broken by Wang Chong instead. My saber! This is impossible! Suddenly, a scream sounded. In the Bluebottle Pavilion, the shopkeeper of the White Tiger Greatsword Pavilion suddenly leaped down to the ground. Picking up the tip of the saber, he let out a shrill scream. His face was pale, and he looked as though he was about to cry. That was the treasure of the White Tiger Greatsword Pavilion. To think that it would be cut into 2 just like that. This was simply unacceptable. No, impossible. He's just a 15-year-old child. How could he have learned such a formidable swordsmithing technique? Furthermore, it's such a sharp sword. Zhang Tsong and Zhang Jian were dumbfounded by the sight before them. Of all of them, they were the only ones who knew Wang Chong's background the best. This was also the reason why the shock that Wang Chong gave them was the greatest. Duke Jiu's lineage didn't have any swordsmithing techniques. Even if one were to beat them to death, they wouldn't be able to imagine where Wang Chong learned such a formidable swordsmithing technique from. In that instant, the duo suddenly realized that they had underestimated Wang Chong, and it was a huge underestimation at that. I'm afraid that the matter regarding the Hyderabad ores will be in trouble. In that instant, the same thought flashed across the duo's mind. Chapter 59. Before today, this storm was nothing more than a farce to them. From the start to the end, they didn't think that Wang Chong would win. In fact, just a moment ago, they were still trying to persuade Wang Chong to give up on the duel gamble. Thus, the Zhang clan was willing to use their own swords in place of Wang Chong's, thus minimizing his losses. The two of them even thought that as long as Wang Chong passed the contract for the Hyderabad ores to the Zhang clan, they could help the Wang clan to minimize their losses. Yet, the only thing that they didn't expect was for Wang Chong to win. In the Bluebottle Pavilion, Huang Jiao was dumbfounded. A moment ago he was still speaking eloquently, encouraging everyone to conduct the duel gamble as a civil duel. But in the next moment, the fellow whom he said to be trying to impress the crowd on the first day used a clean slash to sever more than a dozen swords, displaying his overwhelming strength. Who in the world is that fellow? In that instant, Huang Jiao felt a chill rising from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. The entire Bluebottle Pavilion was deathly silent. In stark contrast, the area outside the Bluebottle Pavilion was bustling with activity. Amidst the crowd, countless weapon merchants felt as though there was a magnitude 12 earthquake in their hearts when they saw this shocking sight. The sword duel gamble in the Bluebottle Pavilion had attracted almost all of the weapon merchants in the capital. In the past few days, even though the duel hadn't started yet, everything related to the sword duel gamble had been thoroughly investigated by the crowd. The swords and sabers hanging in the Bluebottle Pavilion were arranged according to the standing of the powers behind them. Even though Wei Hao's slash had only severed more than a dozen swords, without exception, they were the sharpest and most illustrious weapons in the Bluebottle Pavilion. Every single one of them came from prestigious clans. But before Wang Chang's Wuxia steel sword, all of them broke. What kind of sword is that? How could it be so formidable? Everyone was astonished. Putting aside the swordsmiths and smiths of various sizes, even the top-notch swords of the Huang, Lu, Cheng, Zhang, and other prestigious swordsmithing clans were destroyed as well. This was something that no one had dared to imagine before. In that instant, time seemed to have stopped. Everyone's gazes were gathered on the Bluebottle Pavilion, on the Wuxia steel in Wei Hao's hands. Under the bright sunlight, everyone saw the world's first real Wuxia steel weapon for the first time. It was a strangely shaped longsword that was about 3 feet long. It had a gorgeous silver appearance, as if it had been plated with mercury. On its surface, there were strange silver patterns that other swords didn't have. They were like flowing water, exceptionally beautiful. The longsword was extremely sharp. After cutting through more than a dozen famous swords, the body of the sword was not damaged at all. There was not even a scratch on it. It was unbelievably hard. Not only so, the black cloth covering the scabbard was also torn apart by Wei Hao, revealing a black scabbard. From the side, one could see that the inner layer of the scabbard was made of precious golden threaded Jinan wood and the outer layer was made of black whale skin. The two of them were sewn together with gold and silver threads, making it look noble and elegant. Also, different from the other swords sold in the market, the scabbard of this long sword was inlaid with red agate, coral, and green turquoise stones. These gems weren't simply inlaid on the scabbard. Instead, according to a certain aesthetic pattern, an elegant plum blossom was inlaid on the scabbard. In that instant, everyone was stunned by the beautiful scabbard. This was especially so for the swordsmiths in the crowd. Their mouths were agape, unable to say a word. No one had ever spent so much effort on a scabbard before. It was clear that a lot of time had been spent on the inlaying of the gems. To the swordsmiths of the Central Plains, this was something unimaginable. Everyone knew that the crux of a sword was the sword itself, not the scabbard. All those who worked hard in other areas would be considered to be gaudy, flashy, and impractical. Thus, there wasn't a single sword shop or shop in the Central Plains, including the few prestigious swordsmithing clans, that would spend so much effort on a scabbard. Even if those master swordsmiths were willing to put in extra effort on the scabbard, it wouldn't be to such an extent. The precious gems that Wang Chong inlaid on the scabbard probably cost more than 600 gold taels. Not only so, Wang Chong had even spent some effort on the hilt of the Wuxia steel sword. The handguard was made of silver and gold, and the handle was made of black rhinoceros horn. Furthermore, just like the scabbard, precious gems were inlaid on the hilt as well. If it was anyone else, they would surely say that it was flashy and impractical. However, after witnessing the prowess of the Wuxia steel sword, no one dared to say a single word. Good sword. It is indeed a good sword. To think that there would be such a sharp sword in the Central Plains. In the Bluebottle Pavilion, Mo Zaid could see everything clearly. Holding onto the sides of the rattan chair, he abruptly stood up. He had always been very relaxed about this wager. But at this instant, Mo Zaid suddenly realized that he had truly underestimated this sword duel gamble. This trip to the Central Plains wasn't in vain. With such a sword, no matter how high the price is, it will be worth it. No matter what, I must bring a sword back. Mo Zaid stared at the Wuxia steel sword in Wei Hao's hands, and his eyes lit up. Swords of the same grade would at most leave a few cuts on each other's swords. It was absolutely impossible for one sword to break the other's sword. To achieve such an effect, the quality of the sword had to far surpass the other. The difference between the two was like the difference between a treasured sword and an ordinary metal. There was something that Mo Zaid didn't tell Wang Chong. Even though his personal sword wasn't the best in Karak's Spazinu, it was definitely one of the best. It could definitely represent the highest level of swordsmithing in Karak's Spazinu. To think that Wang Chong's sword was able to break his personal Karak's Spazinu sword in a single strike. Clearly, Wang Chong's sword wasn't just slightly superior to his, it was completely superior. There was a huge chasm between the two. I've really profited from this trip to Central Plains. Mo Zaid was incomparably agitated. In Wang Chong's sword, he saw a skill that surpassed that of Karak's Spazinu. If he could bring such a skill to Karak's Spazinu and promote it, it would be worth more than 10,000 gold taels. At this moment, Mo Zaid's heart was filled with a strong desire. He had to buy this unprecedented sword. There was another person who felt the same resonance with Mo Zaid. However, different from Mo Zaid, Zhao Fengxian's attention wasn't on the Wuxia steel sword in Wei Hao's hands. From the moment Wei Hao made his move and jumped down from the third floor, Zhao Fengxian's attention had been on the metal mountain that Wei Hao had split apart. It's too sharp. Most famous swords and sabers would only be able to cut 4 to 5 centimeters into raw metal. However, this sword was able to split apart a zhang tall metal mountain. If it was on the battlefield, it would definitely be sliced into two along with its armor. Zhao Fengxian was an imperial army member of the royal palace. The moment Wei Hao made a move, Zhao Fengxian immediately felt the value hidden within it. Wang Chong's sword was too sharp. If such a sword and saber were to form an army on the battlefield, they would be able to slay even gods and Buddhas alike. Not only so, Zhao Fengxian also thought of another matter. Huang Xiaoyan has been suppressing me with the famous Sui sword, Snow Drinker. In terms of weapons and equipment, I am no match for him. If I could have such a treasured sword, I would definitely be able to suppress him in the selection of commanders in the palace. Looking at Wang Chong's back, countless thoughts flashed across Zhao Fengxian's eyes. The reason why Zhao Fengxian looked at Wang Chong wasn't just to buy a sword. In the imperial army, Zhao Fengxian had a nemesis, Huang Xiaotian. He was slightly older than Zhao Fengxian, and just like Zhao Fengxian, he was a commander in the imperial army. The factional struggles within the imperial army were extremely intense. Zhao Fengxian and Huang Xiaotian belonged to two different factions, and they had a competitive relationship. Initially, there was no grudge between Zhao Fengxian and Huang Xiaotian. Zhao Fengxian also thought that the conflict between factions shouldn't have much to do with an individual. Furthermore, Huang Xiaotian was older than him, so Zhao Fengxian had always tolerated him in the royal palace. However, for some reason Huang Xiaotian seemed to hate science like Zhao Fengxian. Not only did Zhao Fengxian's tolerance not end well, Huang Xiaotian even thought of him as cowardice and incompetence. Not only so, Huang Xiaotian's personality was extremely unforgiving. Not only did he speak viciously to Zhao Fengxian when they met in the royal palace, he even made use of the situation to suppress Zhao Fengxian's subordinates and friends. Zhao Fengxian could tolerate the former, but the latter was a huge taboo for him. From then on, the two of them were like fire and water. On top of that, the position of Imperial Army Marshal suddenly became vacant, and the two factions elected Zhao Fengxian and Huang Xiaotian respectively. This made the relationship between the two of them even more tense. In the end, everyone was involved in this matter. Zhao Fengxian and Huang Xiaotian weren't the only ones. Even their subordinates were stifled by the matter, and they fought with one another both in the open and in the shadows. As a result, their relationship became extremely strained. At this point, there was no way out for either of them. Zhao Fengxian thought that he was talented, but Huang Xiaoyan had the advantage of being older. Furthermore, he was wielding a sword from the Sui dynasty, causing Zhao Fengchen to be in a disadvantageous position. Not too long ago, in a spar, Zhao Fengchen suffered a great loss, and even his sword was severed. Zhao Fengchen was agitated. For the sake of his clan, subordinates, and his own future, he decided to find a sword that could suppress Huang Xiaotian. However, the grade of Huang Xiaotian's Snowdrinker was simply too high. The swords from the sword shops and smithing clans in the capital couldn't compare to it at all. Zhao Fengchen went to all sorts of sword shops and smithing shops, but he was left disappointed. Until he met Wang Chong selling swords in the Blue Bottle Pavilion. This is the only hope I have to defeat Huang Xiaotian. No matter what, I must get my hands on that sword. Zhao Fengchen glanced at his sword, which had been severed by Wang Chong, and determination flashed across his eyes. Just when everyone was focused on the Wuxia steel sword in Wei Hao's hand, a loud shout sounded in the Blue Bottle Pavilion, startling everyone. Chapter 60. The crowd exclaimed in shock. This move came too abruptly, and many people couldn't react in time. Not good. Wei Hao's face paled in fright. He had just followed Wang Chong's instructions and split the metal mountain apart. He didn't expect that someone would make a move on him. Furthermore, this person's cultivation was higher than his, and he wasn't a match for him at all. In the blink of an eye, Wei Hao did not have the time to think. He instinctively raised his sword high above his head. Clang! The broadsword was split into two, and the tip of the sword flew more than 10 zhang away. Impossible! I have been forging swords for 10 years. How can there be a sword that is tougher and sharper than mine in this world? The full-bearded brawny man stared at the broken sword in his hand, and his expression seemed to be agitated. Before he could finish his words, he spurted a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. Wei Hao was taken aback. Only then did he realize that the full-bearded brawny man wasn't coming for him, but for the Wuxia steel sword in his hand. Ha! This is the sword forged by my brother, the #1 sword in the world. Who else wants to give it a try? After a moment of silence, Wei Hao suddenly turned around and raised the Wuxia steel sword high up with a proud expression. Wei Hao had been on tenterhooks in this duel, worried that Wang Chong wouldn't be able to match up to him, and that he would have to pay an astronomical sum of compensation. Yet, Wei Hao didn't expect his brother to be so formidable. There were so many prestigious swordsmithing clans, smiths, but none of them could match up to his brother. Even the ferocious-looking full-bearded brawny man spurted blood in anger, as though he couldn't accept that there was a sword that was more formidable than him in the world. Wei Hao felt incomparably proud to have such a brother. This is my brother. This is my brother. Did you all see that? Did you all see that? Wei Hao stood in front of the Blue Bottle Pavilion in high spirits. If he could, he would have loved to tell the entire world what he was thinking. Ha! Is there no one? Since you all aren't going to compete with me, I will represent my brother to compete with you all. Wei Hao burst into laughter. Suddenly, he leaped up to the second floor, and using the railing, he leaped up to the third floor. Not good. On the Blue Bottle Pavilion, the participating clans immediately reacted, and their faces paled in shock. Wait! We admit defeat. I don't want to compete. Even swordsmithing clans like the Zhang clan, Lu clan, Huang clan, and Cheng clan were no match for them, let alone small clans like them. He might not be able to win the sword gamble, but at least he could protect his own sword. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Some people immediately flew out and tried to take down their swords. Unfortunately, it was too late. Clang! In mid-air, a cold light swept out and the remaining dozen or so swords on the gatehouse were immediately cut into two, clanging as they fell to the ground. Ha! Let's see if you still dare to laugh at my brother. Wei Hao did a somersault in the air and landed steadily on the railing. He held the Wuxia steel sword in his hand and laughed at the crowd. For the past 7 days, Wei Hao had had enough of these people's taunts, mockery, and ridicule. Now that there was such a rare opportunity, he would not let it go. Young Master Wei, why are you doing this? We have already admitted defeat. An elder from a local swordsmithing clan stared at Wei Hao with an awful expression. If it was anyone else, they would have already taught him a lesson. However, Wei Hao was the son of the Duke of Wei, and he had a high status. He wasn't someone they could casually touch. But, feeling sorry for my brother? Hee, you were one of the people who mocked my brother and said that he was still wet behind the ears, right? Wei Hao said bluntly. The elder's expression changed and he immediately shut his mouth. Huh, all right Wei Hao, come down. Wang Chong smiled and waved his hand. Looking at the reactions of the crowd, it was clear that he had achieved his goal with this sword gamble. Pung! Wei Hao flipped over the railing and landed on the ground. The Wuxia steel sword in his hand glowed with a cold light. When the cold light was pointed at them, other than Wang Chong, the others quickly retreated as though they were avoiding a snake or a scorpion. Wang Chong's sword was incomparably sharp, and he could easily slice apart a metal mountain that was taller than a human with a single slash. If such a sword were to fall on him, he would probably be able to pierce several holes in his body. No matter how high their cultivation was, it was impossible for their bodies to be tougher than steel. Wang Chong sneered in disdain. Thinking back to the attitude of these people, it was truly a world of difference. Wang Chong. Wei Hao sheathed his sword and returned it to Wang Chong. His admiration for Wang Chong had reached its peak. In this sword gamble, Wang Chong had given him a huge surprise. Back then at the Eight Gods Pavilion, Wang Chong had guided him to defeat Gao Fei, thus earning Wei Hao's trust. In that case, Wei Hao really admired him from the bottom of his heart for the sword and saber gamble. Previously, Wang Chong owed 90,000 gold taels to the two Sindhi Buddhist monks and 1,700 gold taels at the Eight Gods Pavilion. Furthermore, for the sword gamble, Wang Chong had to bear the risk of paying hundreds of thousands of gold taels. Everything related to Wuxia steel appeared in Wei Hao's mind at this moment. Wei Hao couldn't help but admit that this comrade who had grown up with him had a quality that he didn't possess. Once he identified a point, he displayed extraordinary insight, courage, and insight. Wei Hao was ashamed of his inferiority. Wang Chong would never know that it was at this moment that Wei Hao had built up his absolute trust in Wang Chong. Alright, everyone. The sword gamble has come to an end, so there shouldn't be any complete swords left. According to the rules, each of you will pay 1,200 gold taels. I believe that with your standing, you won't go back on your words, right? Wang Chong turned around and looked at the crowd behind him. This time, surprisingly, no one said a word. Everyone was stunned by the young man in front of them who was only in his teens. Or to be more precise, they were stunned by the Wuxia steel sword in his hands. Shopkeeper Luo, you know many people in the capital, so I'll leave this matter to you. I'll have to trouble you to collect all of the gambling winnings for me. Gongzi, don't worry, leave this matter to me. A voice filled with admiration sounded from the corner of the room. Wei Hao, let's go. Let's go celebrate today. Wang Chong smiled. Flinging his sleeves, he didn't leave through the passageway. Instead, he leaped down from the third floor of the Blue Bottle Pavilion. Is the height of the third floor 6 meters or 9 meters? There must be some brothers who miscalculated. Carrot. Behind him, Wei Hao chuckled and leaped down as well. Boom. Upon seeing Wang Chong leap down from the third floor, the crowd outside the Blue Bottle Pavilion erupted in cheers. Look, that person is coming down. Make way. I can't see him. What does it have to do with me? The number one swordsman in the world. The number one swordsman in the world. To think that it would be such a young man. I've really broadened my horizons. You can't judge a book by its cover. To think that a young man could defeat such a prestigious clan. If I hadn't witnessed it with my own eyes, I would have never believed it. Praises sounded from the crowd. It was a far cry from the sarcasm and ridicule from before. At this moment, the arrogant fool had become infinitely more mysterious in the eyes of the crowd. Hearing these praises, Wang Chong's mood improved. Without saying anything, he walked toward the carriage parked outside with Wei Hao. Wait a moment. On the Blue Bottle Pavilion, upon seeing that Wang Chong was about to leave, Zhao Fengchen immediately leaped down from the Blue Bottle Pavilion and chased after Wang Chong. Wang Gongzi, your sword and saber, I want it. I'm willing to pay 20,000 gold taels. Zhao Fengchen raised 2 fingers and said resolutely. Boom. Hearing this voice, a commotion broke out among the crowd. 10,000 gold taels. There was actually someone who was willing to pay 10,000 gold taels to buy a sword. Furthermore, it wasn't 10,000 gold taels but 20,000 gold taels. It was even higher than the final price that Wang Chong had set. But before the crowd could recover from their shock, another voice sounded from the Blue Bottle Pavilion, 25,000 gold taels. Wang Gongzi, I'm willing to pay 25,000 gold taels to buy your sword. 25,000 gold taels. These 5 words were like a huge boulder that smashed into the crowd, causing a huge ripple. Wei Hao staggered and nearly fell. At the same time, Wang Chong also stopped his footsteps. 25,000 gold taels. This was a price that was higher than Wang Chong's by 5,000 gold taels. Hearing this voice, Zhao Fengchen's face also changed. Turning around, he saw a bearded Western region's merchant jumping down from the Blue Bottle Pavilion. This person was none other than the Carax Spazanu merchant, Mo Zid. Wang Gongzi, allow me to express my respect to you. Your swordsmithing skills are superb, something that I have never seen before. If you can sell that sword to me, you will be my Mozaid's friend forever. Mo Zid placed a hand on his chest and bowed, sincerely. Insane, he must be insane. To spend 25,000 gold taels just to buy a sword. I won't be able to finish spending this sum of money even in 10 lifetimes. No matter how sharp that sword is, surely there's no need to spend so much money on it. The crowd gathered in the Blue Bottle Pavilion was dumbfounded by this price. Especially those weapon merchants, they couldn't believe their ears. They had been weapon merchants for their entire lives, but they never knew that the price of a sword could reach more than 10,000 gold taels. Furthermore, there were actually people who wanted to buy it. Similarly, the crowd of swordsmithing clans and the shopkeepers of the Blue Bottle Pavilion were also dumbfounded. Clearly, they didn't expect such a sight to occur. Even Huang Jiao, who didn't have a good impression of Wang Chong, was stunned speechless. A business worth tens of thousand gold taels had already surpassed his understanding. He had never come into contact with a business of this level in his entire life. As for Cheng Yuqing and the other elders of the swordsmithing clans, even though they didn't say a word, their faces were grim. Instinctively, they felt that this sight would have a huge impact on the swordsmithing clans and the swordsmithing industry. Mo Zaid's body didn't move, but his eyes had already taken in the reactions of the crowd. To spend 25,000 gold taels to buy a sword, these people must have thought that he was insane. However, only Mo Zaid knew how rare of an opportunity he had come across. In his eyes, what he saw wasn't a sword, but a superior swordsmithing skill that surpassed this era. This kind of swordsmithing skill was something that could only be chanced upon, and it was something that couldn't be measured with money. When our Carax Spazinu obtains this skill, you will know how profitable of a deal this is. Mo Zaid thought to himself, 30,000 gold taels. Just as these thoughts flashed through Mo Zaid's mind, an earth-shattering voice sounded by his ear. Zhao Fengchen had raised the price to 30,000 gold taels. Chapter 61. 32,000 taels. Mo Zaid said, 35,000 taels. Zhao Fengchen said without any hesitation, 37,000 taels. Mo Zaid gritted his teeth. The wealth of the merchants of the western regions was well known in the Central Plains. However, 30,000 gold taels was still a huge sum to Mo Zaid. Mo Zaid couldn't understand why the fellow before him would spend so much money to compete with him for a sword. 40,000 taels. Zhao Fengchen replied resolutely, as though he wasn't talking about 40,000 gold taels, but just a number. The Zhao clan didn't lack money. No matter what, Zhao Fengchen couldn't lose his prestige before a merchant from the western regions. Furthermore, the position of an imperial army marshal wasn't something that could be measured with money. There was a limit to the number of marshals in the imperial army, and it wasn't every day that one would have such an opportunity. Furthermore, the moment one was promoted to the marshal of the imperial army, it was equivalent to opening the door to promotion. In the future, there would be more opportunities for one to come into contact with more cultivation techniques and resources, thus allowing one to rise to a higher position. These weren't things that an ordinary commander could compare up to. More importantly, no matter what, he couldn't lose to Huang Xiaotian. 41,000 taels. Mo's aide gritted his teeth. Clearly he wasn't willing to do so. There's no need to compete. I won't sell it to you. Just when Zhao Fengshen was about to continue arguing, Wang Chong suddenly turned around and said something that left the both of them dumbfounded. The moment he said those words, the rowdy crowd suddenly fell silent. Everyone's gazes fell on Wang Chong. Why? Astonished, the both of them blurted out. 40,000 gold taels. Such a high price was already 2 times that of Wang Chong's. Any ordinary person would probably be overjoyed by the news and would be dying to sell the sword as soon as possible. Yet, Wang Chong rejected the offer. Isn't the reason why you hung the sword in the Blue Bottle Pavilion so that you can sell it? Zhao Fengshen said. That's right. With such a high price, why would Wang Gongzi refuse to sell it? Isn't this reasonable for Gongzi? Mo Zaid also said. Wang Chong's words had really caught him off guard. Mo Zaid had thought of the possibility of encountering a strong competitor, but he never expected that the owner of the sword, Wang Chong, would actually refuse to sell it. I've already told you that you only have 7 days. You can't touch or look at him. Furthermore, he only had 2 hours a day, and he wouldn't miss it. Now, 7 days have passed, and the 2 hours of selling time has also passed. Wang Chong pointed to the Blue Bottle Pavilion. In that instant, Zhao Fengshen, Mo Zaid, Qing Yuqing, Huang Jiao, and the others were all dumbfounded. Only then did everyone remember that Wang Chong had indeed mentioned this rule on the first day. His sword was only for sale for 7 days. No one was allowed to look at it or touch it. Furthermore, it was only for 2 hours a day. Everyone had heard of this rule countless times, but no one took it to heart. But no one expected that they would be rejected by Wang Chong because of this rule. Wei Hao, let's go. Ignoring Mo Zaid and Zhao Fengshen, Wang Chong beckoned Wei Hao and left. This time, Wei Hao didn't doubt Wang Chong's words. With a smile, he turned around and quickly followed behind Wang Chong. Wait a moment, rules can be changed. Wang Gongzi, I'm willing to pay a higher price. Mo Zaid called out from behind. Wang Chong smiled as though he didn't hear Mo Zaid's words. In an instant, he covered a distance of several dozen zhang. With a flick of his sleeves, Wang Chong quickly dived into the carriage. Boom! Behind him, the crowd erupted into an uproar. Insane, he's really going insane. How can there be such a person in the world, refusing money that is offered to him? 40,000 gold taels. That's 40,000 gold taels. What in the world is that fellow thinking? Aren't swords meant to be sold? Since others are willing to buy it, why shouldn't he sell it? If you don't want it, give it to me. How regretful. If only I knew that this sword is worth so much money, I would have bought it on the first day. The crowd howled in agony, and they felt as though they were going insane. No one knew what Wang Chong was thinking. To many people, this was an opportunity that they could only dream of, and yet Wang Chong had so cleanly rejected it, not the slightest bit tempted. Recalling the precious gems inlaid on Wang Chong's sword, many of them felt their intestines turning green. They beat their chests and stomped their feet in regret. Just the gems inlaid on Wang Chong's Wuzi steel sword alone was worth more than 600 gold taels. However, despite so many people watching it that day, not a single one of them made a move. Even more so, no one expected the sword to be worth so much. Upon thinking of this, the crowd felt a heart-wrenching pain. These scions sure earn money quickly. They don't have to do anything and they can earn a huge sum of money. However, just as the crowd was making a ruckus, no one noticed that in the corner of the crowd, there was a man in his 30s or 40s. He had an unshaven beard and disheveled clothes. He looked like a hooligan, and he was silently watching the direction in which Wang Chong had left. No one knew when this person arrived, and no one knew where he came from. All they knew was that this person had witnessed the entire process of the sword gamble. 32 swords, each losing 1,200 gold taels, adding up to 38,400 gold taels. This is truly a huge sum of money. The man looked in the direction of Wang Chong, and his eyes flashed with an indescribable emotion. In this era where mathematics wasn't advanced, most people had to use their fingers to calculate from 1 to 10. However, this hooligan-like man was extremely familiar with the process. Without even thinking, he easily calculated the profit that Wang Chong had earned from the gamble. Chuckling, the man suddenly leaned against the wall and shakily stood up. Then, he walked in the direction of Wang Chong. The carriage didn't move. Xianxia and Menglong were outside instructing the men from the Blue Bottle Pavilion to move boxes after boxes of gold into the carriage. On the other hand, Wang Chong and Wei Hao were waiting silently in the carriage. Several 10,000 gold taels wasn't a small sum. However, with the men from the Duke of Wei residence guarding them, they weren't afraid of anyone causing trouble. Wang Chong and Wei Hao were waiting for Xianxia and Menglong to finish their task. 38,400 gold taels. Once this is done, I won't be too far away from my target of 90,000 gold taels. After settling the problem of the sword duel gamble, Wang Chong felt much more at ease. Without having to sell a single sword, just the sword duel gamble alone had earned him an additional 40,000 gold taels. This was something that Wang Chong didn't expect. Even though he was still a distance away from reaching 90,000 gold taels, Wang Chong wasn't in a hurry. He had his own plans for everything that had happened. After I'm done with this matter, I will be able to focus on my cultivation. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. His hands clasped the back of his head, his body relaxed, and he slowly leaned back against the wall of the carriage. The pressure from the clan was too great, and all sorts of dangers followed him like a shadow. A single misstep could lead to his complete defeat. Under such circumstances, Wang Chong didn't dare to be distracted. Naturally, he wouldn't be able to focus on his cultivation either. However, now that he had resolved his clan's crisis and obtained the Hyderabad ores, Wang Chong had laid down the most stable foundation for his future. With this, Wang Chong could finally be free of worries. Wang Chong, why didn't you announce your identity at the Blue Bottle Pavilion? If you had done so, you would have been able to save yourself some trouble. In the carriage, Wei Hao suddenly spoke. Even now, he still couldn't understand this matter. If those fellows knew that Wang Chong was a descendant of the Wang clan, their attitude would definitely be different. There's no need for that. Wang Chong smiled. I can settle such trivial matters myself. If I were to rely on my clan for everything, wouldn't I be lacking in ambition? Wei Hao was taken aback. He didn't expect this. What about Zhao Fengchen? It's 40,000 gold taels. It's a pity that I missed such a good opportunity. Wei Hao said with a pained expression. Even though he believed in Wang Chong's decision, he couldn't help but feel that it was a pity that he had missed out on 40,000 gold taels just like that. Hearing Wei Hao's words, the smile on Wang Chong's face widened. Don't worry, I won't be able to escape. Wang Chong said. There were some things that Wang Chong didn't go into detail about. Wei Hao didn't know that the reason why Wang Chong set up the rule of not looking at or touching the swords was because he had no intention of selling them at all. The crux of hunger marketing was to not satisfy the buyer's appetite easily. If Wang Chong had agreed to Zhao Fengchen's request, he would have gotten the 40,000 gold taels. However, he wouldn't be able to sell the other Wuxi steel swords at such a price. This was something that Wang Chong couldn't do. As for Zhao Fengchen, Wang Chong wasn't worried about him at all. Given the deep affinity between him and the Wuxi steel swords, it was impossible for him to run away. However, these weren't things of this era, so it wasn't appropriate for Wang Chong to tell Wei Hao about it. Xianxia and Menglong were extremely efficient. In just a short moment, the 38,400 gold taels had been moved. Half of it was moved to Wang Chong's carriage while the other half was moved to Wei Hao's carriage. The experts of the Wei residence followed behind the carriage. Gongzi, it's done. Xianxia and Menglong pulled open the curtains and entered the carriage. Wang Chong nodded his head. With a wave of his hand, the carriage started moving from the Blue Bottle Pavilion and slowly moved forward. What are you doing? Do you even know how to walk? Are you blind? The carriage made a turn, and after traveling for a dozen meters, a commotion suddenly occurred in front of them. Following which, Coachman's berating voice sounded. It seemed as though someone had charged under the carriage. Before Wang Chong and Wei Hao could react, "Gotcha!" The door of the carriage was forcefully opened from the outside. A dirty hand reached in and Wang Chong and Wei Hao saw a disheveled, mischievous head. "Gongzi, please lend me some money. Don't worry, I will write a contract and return it to you in the future." Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.